We're a couple minutes after 12, so we'll get started. Very glad to see those of you who are here in person in Sykes 255, and to those of you who are joining us today via Zoom. My name is Bradley Flam. I'm the Director of the Office of Sustainability at Westchester University, and we are very proud to sponsor this series of sustainability research and practice seminars with our colleagues in the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and our colleagues in the Sustainability Council Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. We have a full program this semester. Today is our second presentation, and it is followed by 10 more over the course of the next 10 weeks. So please join us for the rest of the program. If you're here in person, grab a copy of the program if you'd like. For those of you online, you can find the full program on the Office of Sustainability's homepage. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask all of you to join me in welcoming Finn Schmidhuber.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Finn. So before, I'm presenting on light pollution. Before we start, I just want to say thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come here, those in person and on Zoom. Thank you so much for just being here and being willing to learn and listen. So first, I want to talk a little bit about me and who I am. So obviously my name is Finn. I go by they them pronouns, I am a student here at Westchester University. I'm currently starting my senior year and will be graduating this winter. I am a computer science major and I have a astronomy and CPL minor, which is civic and professional leadership. I have some experience just in general with astronomy and sustainability. I have done research with I've been a student research assistant in astronomy with Dr. Gagne, if anyone knows him. And I am a now newly sustainability peer educator. And I've also been doing wellness promotion peer education for this is now into my 4th year. So I've been doing that for a while. And then next I have my interests are I have passions for astronomy and sustainability. Specifically, I've done my capstone on light pollution, which combines both of those, and has been very, very knowledgeable and very eye-opening for me because I've never explored that before even this year. So next, I want to go over about how this all started. How did I even get into this research? Well, first, as I said before, is my honors capstone project. So prior to last semester, which was spring 2024, I actually came up with the idea of light pollution and positively affecting the community of Westchester, which was our assignment to positively affect a campus community or even the community in general. And that was one of those topics that seemed to combine a lot of my interests, and I really wanted to make it like a unique experience because it seemed like that wasn't very taught like much about on our campus. And so I chose that topic. I started my project and I reached out to Dr. Gagne because, as you know, he is into astronomy, and at that time I did not know his connections, but it turns out that he was actually part of the green team. He was served as basically the person in charge of leading the Dark Skies Initiative, first when the state senator wanted to allot someone to help with light pollution. So I got into contact with Dr. Gagne, and therefore I got in contact with the green team and those on the committee for the Dark Skies Initiative, and the 2 co-chairs, Tim Mahler and I'm blanking on the other person, but Suzanne Webster, I think. So both of them I met them both in person actually recently, but I will be helping them throughout the course of the semester and attending their meetings. And then finally, this is the future, but this January in 2025, I will be presenting at the American Astronautical Society. It is the 245th annual meeting, or excuse me, I think it's biannual. But I will be presenting there along with Kate Frederick, who is a fellow research student of Dr. Guy's as well. She is a sophomore now. And I will be helping her put together what they call an eye poster. I think it's a virtual basically poster that they use to post information. It's like interactive. So I will be creating that over the course of the semester. And I will be attending that in January. And that is in, I believe, Maryland at the Gaylord Convention Center. So that's one of the things I'm very excited for that, and to be able to present that to a lot of people who care about. And then, so let's get into a little bit of the content we'll be talking about with today's presentation. So first, I want to talk about light pollution in general and what it is. I want to talk about the harmful effects of light pollution. And then I want to talk about what we can do to fix it. What are the possible solutions for this? Because I feel like light pollution on this campus isn't talked about enough. And I think a lot of the research has been undermined for a while. And even though we've had plenty of clear evidence that there are problems with light pollution. So first, we're going to talk about what is light pollution. And we're going to talk about what is considered light pollution and then how it's produced. So here, what actually is it? What is light pollution? Well, the definition that is on the Dark Sky website, which is a website basically focused on light pollution all across, it's called Dark Sky International. And their definition is the human-made alteration of outdoor lighting levels from others that occur naturally. So that's basically any type of artificial light that's produced, anything that's not the sun, essentially. That can be from anything from a billboard to a street lamp. It can be anything. And then I want to talk about some terms I'll be using throughout the presentation. ALAN, which is artificial light at night, which is just basically any artificial light. Glare, which is the excessive brightness that causes visual discomfort. So a good example of that is, I don't know if you've ever been driving and someone had their high beams on that is coming in the person traffic, but that would be glare, where you can't see anything. Next is sky glow, which is the brightening of the night sky over inhabited areas. And then we have light trespass, which is essentially just light falling where it's not intended or needed. I'll just be using these terms throughout the presentation, and I'll reference that. So some examples of light pollution are cities, outdoor lights, street lights, electronic advertising like billboards, parking lots, sports lighting, greenhouses, factories, industrial lighting. A lot of those are the biggest sources, especially, so these are sequential. So cities and outdoor lightings and street lights are probably the most influential in our light pollution and affect the most. And for some in-person examples, some pictures I took personally. So this is on the left, the left two pictures are of College Arms. The left is a light that is shown directly through a window, and I was actually able to have access to that dormitory to show what it looks like from inside the actual dorm itself. So you'll see on the left, it's pointing directly to the window, and then even with the blinds down in the room itself, it was very, very bright and very, very apparent. So that just shows that even blinds, even a lot of people think, oh, you can just put blinds up, like why don't you just put the blinds down when you sleep? That is one of the problems, is that even blinds don't help that much. And then on the right here, we have our own K lot, which is actually right here in Sykes. You can see this is actually a big source of light pollution actually on campus because of the high amount of lighting and the constant amount of lighting that is present in right outside in the parking lot, and especially due to the height of the lights themselves, they seem to be very protruding throughout the area throughout the night, and these lights are on all night regardless if anyone is there. This picture itself was taken at 4 a.m. There was no one around. But you can see here that even a lot of this light is just used regardless of whether there are people in. some more examples from Westchester. These are very common light fixtures on campus. I'm sure you've seen them around, they're everywhere. They're the most common. Those are just they're good in some ways, but they produce a lot of lighting and are very excessive in a lot of ways, especially in the second picture here, where you can see almost like you can barely even count how many there are, but there are a lot there. That is right next to the SECC building. And during the night, it is very, very bright there. And we'll talk about why that is. Last, and then on the right is just the library. That's one of a different type of light that they use. That's also pretty common, which is essentially one of those twist lights that basically show a lot of produce a lot of light just from the library itself. And then moving on, I wanted to get some basically regional data, not just from where I was at. I wanted to show this is more of a global issue. This isn't just Westchester. This is Middletown, Delaware. This is in the suburban area. And on the left, you can see basically this is an example of sky glow. This is deep into the night. This is not the sun, this is not the sun setting. This is from basically the town that is Middletown. You can see just the amount of lighting you can just see. So this would be the sky glow from Middletown. And then on the right is a house that I photographed of. This one was particularly stood out because they used no kind of blinds or any blockage of the light they were producing, and their lights were very bright. When passing that house, I remember I could just see everything, even though it was complete darkness. And it's one of the examples of very bad light pollution that just can be affected from one house, which can be very, very impactful. Next, we have examples from Baltimore, Maryland. Sorry for the quality of the pictures, but a lot of these lightings were, you can see like how a lot of these lights are basically very high up, and they are very white and they are very bright. So you can probably see here, this like definitely some kind of parking lots there, and there's a lot of just like very high lighting there that just basically are shutting down and probably not affecting the areas that we probably need to. Next, I just want to show some data from satellites. So this is the VIRS, which is this particular satellite that focuses on capturing light that is basically produced from our planet. So it's looking down at the Earth. Here is essentially a light map. I want to show this picture first because it kind of is a fade between where the actual location is via where the actual light is seen. This particular data was taken in 2012, and I believe in April to May. So you can see here that this is Philadelphia right here on the right, and Westchester is actually just to the left. It's almost in the center there. And here on the right, you have basically like a lot of the lighting there. And then this little spot that's in between there is actually Westchester itself.
From your so I got an email on that. I had not clearly, so I'm good now.
They basically have
Right. So now I'm going forward, it should be fine.
seen that change. There is almost no change here. But essentially there is a slight increase of lighting. And then if we see 2022, you'll notice that things get a lot brighter. And this is mainly because of the use of more LED lighting. We've moved away from sodium vapor lighting, which is basically lower, which is more orange light than like white light, and produces a lot more light pollution. And due to it being cheaper and more available, people have started using it more often to make lighting more available to the communities. So you can see this big increase of lighting is mainly due to that reason. Next, I wanted to just do some research into the increase in light levels. So in 2016, there was 80% of the world's population lives under sky glow. And then in 99% of Europe's and America's population lives under sky glow. So it's very, and this was in 2016, this is even before most of the LED lighting was even available. And more popular. So you can only imagine now what the statistics would be. So yeah, pretty crazy. This is a graph I wanted to show, mostly because it shows the difference between sodium vapor lighting and LED lighting. So I'm gonna say break it down. The y-axis here on the left is NELM, which is essentially a measure of the number of visible stars in the night sky. So that's basically when you look up, how many stars can you see? And that would be what they wrote down. And then on the x-axis, you have a sky brightness factor, which is essentially they measured and basically said, oh, this is what the brightness is, and then they mapped it on here and said, how many stars can we actually see? And you'll notice that the green points are data points in 2011, and the blue points are data points in 2021, and the gray points are all years. But you can see there's a difference in between how the correlation between here is essentially over time, less stars are basically visible with less amount of brightness. And that is mainly due to blue light, mostly because of the use of LEDs. LEDs produce more blue light than sodium vapor lamps. And essentially it scatters more in our sky and essentially allows the sky to be less seen and there's less stars that are visible. So even with less lighting, it is even more important that light pollution is handled effectively because even less stars are seen now. And then what's the deal? So why is light pollution important? Why am I talking about this? Right? Obviously it's important for astronomy, but there is no reason why we should tackle this issue if it's not important. So there are a number of harmful effects that light pollution causes, and there is a lot of people do not know these harmful effects, so it is not usually addressed as a very high priority. So there are some harmful effects of light pollution. So I'm going to go over wildlife, how does it affect wildlife, the consequences. I'm going to go over harmful effects on humans, and then I'm going to go over harmful effects on safety. And then I'll talk about some other ones at the end. But yeah, first let's start with wildlife. So ALAN affects a variety of species of birds, fish, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, insects, and other invertebrates, plants. Basically, a very, very large portion of the animals available that are basically, because ALAN is almost everywhere, as we saw before. And there's a very big population that is affected by artificial lights at night. And most of these effects are seen particularly in aquatic environments, including the world's oceans, even at depths of hundreds of meters. It's a very prevalent thing that has many articles that talk about how it affects those kinds of creatures. So moving on with how it disrupts them. Well, it affects a lot of their habits that have basically been produced over thousands of years. Finding food, the time at which certain animals emerge from their hiding places, plant and animal reproduction, sequencing of the seasonal events in plants, animal migration and communication. And basically a lot of the ways that animals communicate, basically live their lives are affected by ALAN, and usually it's in a very negative way. Some examples from before, birds are very prone to flying towards lights at some point. It's called phototaxis, which is either the repelling from light or the attraction to light. And many birds are injured or die this way by running into large skyscrapers that are very bright. Another example is sea turtles from the slide before. When sea turtles first hatch, they basically are attracted to the light, the highest amount of light, and usually without any artificial light, that is the ocean, because of the moon reflecting off of the ocean. But with artificial light, it leads them the opposite direction, and it's very sad. but a lot of coastal cities try to emphasize this because it is a very big problem there. And then finally, more basically around here in regional fireflies, which is the actual state insect. And it is essentially very sad because when there is artificial light present, they essentially they rely on their own lighting from other species to mate. And females are on the ground, and when you have males in the air, they are basically signaling to the female to try to attract a mate, and artificial light basically denies this, and it is very harmful to fireflies. So there are a number of ways that A-Land can disguise different barriers and essentially injure or kill certain wildlife just based on the light that is present. It adds pressures to other environmental pressures that don't really need to be there in many species, and can basically affect, weaken the immune system of some organisms and make them less tolerant to environmental stress. And basically a whole variety of bad things that just increases the stress on the animal that doesn't need to be there when there are so many other things affecting it. And they even influence how the species evolve and work. So it is very, very harmful for our wildlife. But that is not the only thing it affects. It also affects us. It is very harmful to us because of a certain process called circadian rhythm. Essentially, blue light is mostly the problem here, mostly because if you've ever taken have you ever understand how color and light works? Essentially, blue light is actually higher energy than red or orange or any kind of other light, mostly because of how the wavelengths are shorter on blue wavelight. So it basically penetrates more because of the higher energy. So blue light essentially penetrates more things than any other kind of light, which makes it particularly harmful to human health. That's why they say don't watch your screens right before bed, because that affects your sleep cycle and your circadian rhythm. So a lot of the problems with human health are actually due to blue light. So, and essentially blue light is more effective at interfering with our melatonin production, which essentially happens during the circadian rhythm. And this leads to a variety of negative influences. Essentially, there is irregular levels of melatonin and leads to poorer sleep quality, and essentially messes with a lot of the different functions that happen within your body during sleep. And it really, over a long period of time, it actually leads to some serious consequences because your body needs those normal processes to go on, especially with the production of melatonin. So it actually leads to an increased risk for sleep disorders, depression, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, especially breast cancer, and more. I've seen some research articles on Alzheimer's. I've seen a lot of different kinds of essentially like mood disorders. There's a lot of different things that are affecting us that don't really get addressed. And there are a lot of all these articles. I have all these references if you're interested. But it's a very important issue because a lot of people don't address this as the main issue for light pollution. And most of these were backed through the methodology was mostly through people who work night shifts, and like also animal testing through it's basically tested like animals like rats or mice, and basically exposed them to blue light, and that's kind of the results they saw. So next, there's also human safety. So a lot of people believe that the reasons we have light and a lot of light basically shown like all around campus is that it basically makes the area safer. And essentially that's not simply true. It doesn't actually increase safety at all. It may increase feelings of safety, but it actually does not help with safety. There's been many studies that have been done that show that essentially when like continuously increased lighting in an area, it has no effect on crime. It doesn't really matter to like any kind of other crime rates. There have been just no effects of increasing artificial lighting and any kind of increased safety measure. If anything, it actually would make you more prone to getting into crime because you're not aware if you're feeling safe and it's actually not safe there. You might just be more prone to being caught by surprise and more actually more in danger than you think you are. And there are also many things with driving and just general glare that is present here. Essentially, when you have a lot of lights that have a very high intensity to them, it produces glare and it impairs vision. So it makes driving more dangerous. It makes, and like a lot of, whenever you're driving, you may not see a pedestrian because of glare. And there's just a lot of like ways that glare and basically impacts human safety in a negative. There are other negative effects I just wanted to put on here, just because they're also very prevalent, but I just also want to touch on them because they do exist. Energy use / climate change. Obviously, when you are outputting this much light, it uses a lot of energy, and that energy is very costly. So it is not all necessary, and we're being very naive with the way we're using lighting and not being very intentional with the way we use it. So we're wasting a lot of lighting, just lighting areas that are not even important. You'll notice a lot of different light fixtures are not pointing down, which really is important to why we have lighting, because most of the light we need is on the ground, not sideways or upwards. We don't really use that light at all. And there's even some light that just bounces right off the ground and then goes up, which we can't do much about, but we can be very intentional with the other light. We can basically not have it go upwards, which just basically makes it worse. And then also just contributes to the climate change, which just basically is not a good thing because it's just wasting all that energy that is essentially not needed. Social justice and light pollution. Unfortunately, light pollution disproportionately affects marginalized communities. A lot of infrastructure for light pollution is more so in less marginalized communities, and therefore it leads to marginalized communities basically being affected by light pollution experiencely, and often leads to increased health risks and reduced access to natural landscapes for those marginalized communities. And it really is sad, but it is very true. And lastly, I just want to mention that obviously this affects astronomy. When you have a lot of light, you just have worse research results. You just have worse, essentially every kind of research that goes on in astronomy will be worse. That's why most ground telescopes are in the middle of nowhere, because there is no light pollution there, or barely any, because they function the best there, because light pollution very much harms it. So yeah, those are some of just the negative effects. And finally, so we talked about the negative effects and what light pollution actually is. So what can we do to fix it? Because obviously this is a problem that is prevalent not only in Westchester, but all across the entire area and the world. So there are solutions in light fixtures. This is not light pollution is a pollution, but is unlike other pollutions. Air pollution and water pollution, and those require very high amounts of money to solve, and many complex solutions that are usually not very much single-sided. Light pollution is a pollution that is pretty easily solved, actually. It just requires some money to fix, but it's not really a prevalent issue that has many hands and things, where it's not very a complex issue, where just because a lot of the misinformation of our surrounding safety is just not simply true. It is more so the ignorance of some. But regardless, these are some of the solutions in light fixtures, which is shielding, which is essentially basically putting on the light fixtures themselves. If you have essentially a cone over them, it will point most of the light down, which is actually where it's needed. Most lamps don't have shielding. I've actually not seen many with shielding. especially around Westchester, which is unfortunate. But essentially, it just stops unnecessary light from going upwards, which is like trespass, prevents that, which is very good. Reducing the color / the temperature. Essentially, a lot of the lighting we use is white. You'll notice a lot around campus at night that most of the lighting is white. We have some actually good temperature lighting. There's some, you'll notice some of it is orange / yellow. But most of it is white, and the white light produces more blue light, which is bad, especially for human health. So reducing that color / temperature will cause less harm to us in wildlife. Next is intensity. Essentially, lessening the intensity will reduce energy wasted and reduces glare. So when we think many of the lights here on campus have way high intensity and produce a lot of glare. You'll see even those pictures I showed before, a lot of those had glare in them and really are just not helping anybody else see more. It's just more so contributing more to light pollution and just sending more light upwards. And finally is timing. So encrypting light fixtures with motion sensors and basically timers on them will be a very big help, especially in things like parking lots, where at 2 or 3 a.m. someone might not be there for 3 hours. And right, those people are there once in a while, but that's why we need motion sensors, because they would basically help us. If we are there, it will turn on, but if not, it doesn't contribute to light pollution at all. So I think that's honestly one of the important things, is a lot of our campus lights are on all the time. And there are a lot of other universities that have already implemented many of these different kinds of solutions in their light fixtures. But we seem to be lacking behind on that. But there are also many other places that also are lacking behind. So what can you do on a personal level? So there is some that you can do, as I showed before. Obviously, housing does contribute to some light pollution in an area. So like closing the blinds at night to reduce light trespass, turning off lights when not needed, especially outdoors. Using warm, low intensity desk lamps or bulbs. Limiting screen time at night to reduce blue light during the at night. Installing shielded outdoor lighting in your home. Using warm / low intensity bulbs under 3000 degrees Kelvin for outdoor spaces. There's a lot of different things you can do. Now this isn't very much a big impact, but it's a place to start, because it does contribute to light pollution, and each of us taking individual action helps the greater all cause for reducing light pollution in an overall area. Next, we're going to talk about legislation. So one of the things with legislation is it does actually do a lot. It creates lasting change, hopefully lasting change, by regulating outdoor lighting across entire communities. And laws make it a much larger impact on individual efforts. So mandating things like essentially mandating like good dark sky lighting is essentially very important. There is one bill that is actually was brought to my attention by Dr. Gagne. And this bill basically goes over, it's bill HB 1803, and essentially is a very good bill for Pennsylvania, because it essentially makes a lot of large organizations and companies responsible for their outdoor lighting, and essentially makes it so they have to minimize their light pollution. I don't know if you guys know that near Westchester, near all the dealers, the car dealers out there. I don't know if you've ever been out there during the night. You may not have been, but their lights that shine on their cars are on all the time. So, and they're very bright and they're very high up. And all they're doing is lighting up the cars they have during the night. Now, I don't know why they have it like that, because I don't know who's looking at their cars at night. But it is one of those things that is, maybe they want it, but it is very irresponsible in the way that they are making a lot of light pollution. And it's really just not helpful for the community in whole. It's just contributing more to the overall light pollution of Westchester. So it would make them responsible for that kind of lighting. Basically make them use shielding of light fixtures to direct light downward and prevent sky glow like trespass. And then also limit the amount of blue light in outdoor lighting to reduce its impact on human health and the environment. So essentially making lights that are more like orangish color and essentially more shielded and on timers. And then finally, it would also ensure that the Department of General Services oversees the implementation and compliance of these lighting standards in public spaces. So essentially that person, whoever is the Department of the General Services, would basically mandate this and make sure that a lot of people are complying and companies are complying with these dark sky initiatives. It's a very good bill. And that is what we're currently pushing for to get passed. It would help Pennsylvania a lot in terms of light pollution. And finally, we have advocacy. So advocacy, it matters a lot, mostly because it raises awareness about the harmful effects of light pollution on health and wildlife and the environment. It empowers communities to push for dark sky friendly policies and lighting ordinances. And light ordinance is essentially kind of like in between, like it's more of like a promise of a community rather than an actual bill. But it tries to push for better an ordinance is basically essentially a law that's not really a law, just for more of a community that can't get passed. So like if this HB 1803 doesn't get passed, maybe some ordinances would be put in place instead, rather than an actual bill. And then would drive public support for legislation like HB 1803, and ensure a wider adoption of responsible lighting practices. And how to advocate. Essentially promoting responsible lighting, telling your neighbor, hey, your light is shining directly to my house and there is it is very bright and it is unshielded and it is very white. That is one of those things of being an advocate for speaking up against light pollution, because many people do not know. Many people don't take it as an issue. So advocating for that is very, very important. Educating others, obviously, that is part of the other one. Basically sharing the information that light pollution is very harmful and there is a reason why we should reduce it. Engaging local leaders, so things like engaging state senators and like writing them emails and annoying them that this is something you care about, because when they see that and they want to be reelected, they're going to think about what do the people really want, and if that's something you really want and you bother them about it, they will most likely do something about it because they want to be reelected again. So and there's also local leaders in terms of community leaders as well, so that any people responsible for dark sky action. And finally, join dark sky organizations. So things like the Green Team, showing up to meetings, talking about light pollution in your local community. Specifically here, the Green Team and the Dark Skies Initiative. Those are really good places to get started if you wanted to be more involved in your dark sky community. And yeah, advocacy basically is elevating, educating, and empowering. So it's very, very important to advocate for dark skies. And then I have some just general resources here I wanted to point out. So essentially we have the Dark Sky International, which is basically an organization focused on global light pollution and basically solving a lot of issues, talking about, as a lot of great resources. I highly recommend it. It talks about like what are the main practices of lighting. It talks about basically anything lighting wise, the harmful effects. So some of the things I talked about today, that's in there. And it talks about like solutions, and it talks about Globe at Night, which is the actual next one, which is community citizen, citizen science, which is essentially where citizens themselves can basically record their data from like light pollution. So if you basically go out into the community somewhere and you have a light meter, which is a device that measures light pollution, you put comments down like it was cloudy because that affects how like the sky glow basically affects the lighting, and things like that. You basically record your data and it goes to the website, and then you have like a mass basically map of all the different reports from all the different people taking their measurements, and that is very incredibly helpful, because it helps people realize that there is a lot of light pollution, and it can be very, very, a lot more prevalent than you think it is. And then finally, this is actually a journal I took that actually released in this past, like the very early July of this year, just a couple months ago, and it was released by a certain publisher, but it was made by the Dark Sky International, and it essentially is a very, very comprehensive document of a lot of different things that I just talked about right here, talking about the harmful effects, talking about what it actually is, how is it affecting everybody, and essentially like solutions that we can do. It has like over 400 references. So it talks about, so it has a lot of different sources that it basically uses throughout the whole entire, it is a very nice, neat document. It's not that long, but it is very like where are we now kind of, and a very like good comprehensive, really great read if you wanted to check that out. I highly encourage it. And then finally, I have my citations, and thank you so much. And do you have any questions?
Any of our- Well, I could start with the question, getting to, back to that last section of what we can do about it. What can we, Westchester University, do about the contribution our operations are making to light pollution in the borough, in the townships, in the county?
It's a good question. There are a lot of different so things like, there's a lot of, the borough itself is very resistant against change. Anyone who's tried to work with the borough, probably knows that. A lot of it has to do with like there's a lot of different intersectionality and a lot of different problems that come with it. But organizations like the Dark Sky Initiative and the Green Team are great places to get started, because it helps raise awareness for it, and pushing for advocating, being there, like representing there, is a good way to represent the needs for the community. So it's difficult because you can't directly talk to a lot of the borough. I mean, you can't talk to the borough, but a lot of them will outright just like be like, that's one of the many problems that we face. So they're more focused on other issues. But what we can do is advocate. We can push for legislation rather than just the borough itself or the county, because those are very hard, because they're very much worried about bigger issues, or what they believe are bigger issues. So legislation would be the way. Advocacy, showing that the community cares about the issue, makes them more aware that they have to solve that problem in order to make the community happy. And yeah, I think advocating and legislation would be the big ways. Usually legislation is kind of not almost like going over their heads a little bit, but I think it's very necessary, because it's a big region that they're affecting with just bills. And it actually brings it to their attention more. We have a state senator here who is very, very in depth with, like, actually cares about light pollution a lot. And it's one of the people who started it in Westchester. So there are people who care in our communities. We just have to like advocate for it.
Do you think the university could? Well, I guess two questions. How much do we know about what the university's lighting fixtures are contributing to light pollution? And are there things the university could do on its own without being required to do so through legislation?
Right.
Such as shielding some of the outdoor lighting, or reducing the intensity of parking lot lighting. Are those strategies the university could adopt if it wanted to?
Yes, it could. There is a master plan committees, and facilities that essentially looks over a lot of the different plans. They mostly are concerned with, facilities and like, very ambitious plans, I would say. But they are also responsible for a lot, like, for like looking at lighting on campus. And that is something they can most definitely implement on campus. Again, it's one of those hard things because you have to bring it to their attention, and students, it can be very hard for, because so far they have not opened it up to students yet, in terms of their actual meetings that when they meet and they talk about certain issues that they want to address. But as I would say as faculty members or staff, I would say that making your problems, like attending a lot of, there are like presidential picnics, there are excuse me, there's different meetings that happen with the president themselves, and we have a new president now. So this would be a great time to tell her that, hey, we care about this issue, hey, we care about light pollution in general. This is something we want to see change on campus. So getting involved with essentially meeting with higher ups would be very important to changing things on campus.
Thank you.
Nice talk today. I was wondering how much transportation is contributing to light pollution. In the winter, I almost don't want to drive after it gets dark because almost everyone's driving a giant SUV or F-150 type truck that has high power LED headlights, and it seems like they have their high beams on all the time. So is transportation a consideration area or contributor?
Most definitely. I would definitely say that transportation is definitely it's more of a temporary, so light pollution, it talks about, because a lot of the light pollution we talk about is kind of permanent, like light pollution, like every night, right, the lights come on in the parking lot. Or every night, the lights always come on in a very specific area, and it's very consistent. In terms of transportation, I definitely see it being considered, because I can see high traffic areas being considered, especially for those that live around, like in cities, or basically people who live near turnpikes or essentially large transportation areas. And that's more of like a temporary, like there are cars there sometimes, but not always. So I definitely, I think there are some considerations in terms of transportation. I'm not exactly sure what the solutions for like solving like the transportation's light pollution would be. Because it is important to see during the night, especially while you're driving a very fast vehicle, going 60 miles per hour. And it can be dangerous if you don't have that lighting. But like things like high beams, I could definitely see being changed for light pollution, because high beams are especially very harmful for glare, for actually safety in general. I don't have a solution for that exactly, but I do like that consideration of transportation, because it is an issue that a lot of people don't consider, because it's more of a temporary thing, but it is very, since there are a lot of cars and we're a very car centric nation, we essentially have to consider transportation as a source of light pollution.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any benefits from like the blue and white light? I noticed like once we started implementing LEDs, a lot of them are that cooler light tone, but why? Is there a reason?
So there is no particular reason why it is, besides that it looks good. And people would, I think one of the reasons why we're seeing more like white light is because it's more easily implemented and cheaper to produce. People like the white light because it shows more color. There's no particular reason why we are seeing more white light, besides that it is just nicer looking. And it's very much, it causes a lot more harm than good. Yeah, I would say that. And I think a lot of sodium, I believe sodium vapor lamps also are more naturally orange and like yellowish. So when we have LEDs, we have more of a range of colors we can choose. So we prefer white because it shows like actual color rather than, but we're not really considering light pollution in that, so it's more of a preference, I would say.
Can I ask us to pause for just a moment? It's a little after 12:50, and we always pause here for those people who do have to move on to another class or something else at 1 p.m. If you're able to stay for a few more questions, I know I have a few more, but before then, let's give one more round of applause to our speakers. Then I was wondering if we could go back to that question about what we know of light pollution on our campus. Do we have any data on the number of outdoor lamps, of light meter readings? Do we have some sense of just the scale of the problem described empirically? Do we have that information?
Well, facilities definitely has a count. They specifically on the master plan itself, they have a count of every single light fixture on campus. So they know every single what kind of light fixture it is. And they know basically almost everything about like what kind of light like lamp is used on campus. I have never seen, so this is part of my research was initially. So that's actually incoming on this upcoming semester. I wanted to participate in the Globe at night, and that would be around Westchester itself. The university most definitely contributes to light pollution a lot. I don't know if you've ever been in town compared to Westchester, like in town compared to being on campus. But we have a lot more lighting, especially near SECC, than other areas. Especially because a lot of the other surrounding areas are suburban, and most of these suburban areas aren't really a big factor, contributor to light pollution, but I have not had actual quantitative data collected from Westchester University, besides the satellite imaging, that we saw before that, definitely shows an increase in actual light production from our campus. And that's more, and essentially, it's hard to distinguish just because from, just using the satellite data, right? You can't really tell the difference between Westchester University and Westchester. But you would definitely have to go in person with a light meter and do like in-person measurements. But again, the kind of evidence is already, it's honestly a moot point because it's bad. And a lot of our light fixtures are producing a lot of light and they're not following a lot of the dark sky regulated kind of like procedures that you would go through normally to have like safe lighting. So so there's some like orange lights on campus, that a lot of them aren't on timers. There was a pushback in, I believe, 2016 for the light pollution, and they changed a lot of the new buildings and the facilities to include like timers on their indoor lighting. But that is not the case on the outdoor lighting. And barely any of some of them have tops on them, but the shielding part, the hoods that actually go on the lighting is very important. It is a large scale issue. That is my objective this semester, would be to do more quantitative research on how much light pollution is Westchester actually producing compared to surrounding areas. But yeah, I would say that mostly, for the most part, it's still a very big issue regardless.
Yeah.
How do light meters work? And what is the goal? Is the goal 0 for us to not have?
So that's a good question. So the goal more so is not to, so a lot of people look at, like, when people bring up light pollution, a lot of people think like, oh, what you want is no lighting, right? What you want is to, like, for a complete darkness. and that is not the vision. Is more so utilizing light more effectively. We are using our light very ineffectively. So a light meter would measure a lot of light that is just present currently now. Oh, like basically like, I don't know exactly the electronics of it, but essentially it sends up a thing upward and it'll basically give you a measure of the current light. It's not for zero, because zero would be like complete pitch darkness, there's no light anywhere. But it would be less. It would be less than we have now, because and a lot of light mirrors really focus on essentially not having. Because there's a lot of different factors when it goes into, so like cloud coverage. So it's not to reach zero, it's more so, we just want to make our lighting more intentional. That's essentially the main issue. Lighting is needed not really in the air, it needs to be on the ground. There have been a lot of different, I've read a lot of different articles talking about how some universities have lighting, like lit paths, like there's just light on the ground, not like shooting upwards, but just like bulbs there. That kind of like, and then they just like are like just where the paths are, not where, like not shining down or not. So those have been really, really interesting, but again, it's not to have a zero, it's to reduce it, because right now it's because of LEDs and the recent implementation, it's a lot, it's become a lot worse, so.
Are there ways to maybe retrofit what we have here so that rather than shining light up? Or, you know, maybe using lower intensity bulbs or some kind of like a lamp shade? Where we would have more efficient lighting, because from what you're saying, we wanna minimize or maximize the amount of light we have where we need it and minimize the amount of light we have that's extraneous and not necessary.
Exactly. A lot of people, when installing light fixtures on campus, they don't really think about where the, they just think about, we need a light fixture here. They don't think about, oh, where is the light going? They just think, oh, it's kind of dark in this spot, we need a light fixture here. And then they implement the light fixture and it doesn't have a hood, it just shoots light everywhere. And it would be very much possible to do. That's honestly what I really want on campus, would be for the university to invest in hoods and timers and motion sensors. And honestly, you know, when you talk about motion sensors and timers, they can be expensive. But hoods are not expensive at all. It could be a very, very easy solution for the university to fix. That's like a job for facilities to do, which is to install hoods on the light of the lamps, and like even that you would even see a huge difference just because of how many light fixtures you have on campus that aren't actually used for intentional lighting. It's just lighting in general. So.
Would it like make sense to like buy lower intensity lights where we would save on the electricity? And then with the hoods kind of, you know, kind of be better for everyone because we're spending less on electricity and wasting less electricity for extraneous lights.
And that's exactly why, that's exactly a good point for bringing up to the university itself, is like dangling in front of them, like, hey, you know, even though you're spending money on these bulbs and spending money on these hoods and stuff, you're still like, hey, your overall energy cost is gonna go down, like, right? You're not gonna actually be spending that much money now on lighting, right? You're gonna have more intentional lighting. It's not gonna be, you're gonna have lower intensity bulbs. You're gonna, you know, even changing the color of the bulbs, like at the same time, that would be incredibly helpful for just conserving energy and not, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, you know, we're an institution, we're a university. We're supposed to be the forefront of progressive behavior. We're supposed to be like what the future is, right, of what we want to see in the world. And light pollution is one of those things that have been unfortunately around and known for a while. I found a study in 2009 talking about light pollution in all the same texts. And like the same harm, like I talked about all the harms on human health and wildlife. So we've known this information for a while. Just people don't really want to act on it because they don't think it's an issue. So I think you bring up a good point. It would be very enticing for the university to do that. I just don't think they're not really thinking about it. They don't really want to. I don't know why. I'm not exactly sure why they haven't acted on it yet.
I know that I have a friend who always says, follow the money. So if you could quantify it in the way of, this is gonna save you so many, the bulbs are gonna cost this much and it's gonna save you this much and over time, that's, I think, where, you get institutions to buy in, because when you multiply it by the number of bulbs on campus, it ends up being a big savings. I mean, it may only end up being, if they could save $1,000 a year,
Right.
that's $1,000,
Exactly, in their pockets,
And again, it's setting the example for the community,
exactly.
and modeling what the way things should be to be better for the environment.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I think having that quantitative research for how much money you actually would be saving would be very, very enticing for you, for our university specifically.
Thank you, Ben. This was great. All right. All right, thank you to those of you with us on Zoom. We're going to be closing down the Zoom room now. Please join us next week. All right, thanks, Walt.